All right, and welcome to episode 249 of the In the Tank podcast. As always, I'm Donald Kendal, joined by a number of folks here. I've got Justin Haskins, editorial director at the Heartland Institute. What do you got, a Clippers hat on there? Haven't they been canceled?
No, it is a Boston Celtics hat, the most successful sports franchise in the history
also
of
joining us, we have Isaac Orr, research fellow at the Center of the American Experiment. What up, sir? What are you wearing? The Brewers hat?
The least successful sports franchise in all of America.
That's true. They've never won a World Series. They've only been to one. But the Green Bay Packers have 13 championships.
Also joining us, we have Jim Lakely, VP of the Heartland Institute. How are you, good sir?
I'm doing good, and I'm super excited that this is our first podcast on the Ricochet Podcast Network.
So you're canceled, Jim. You're canceled.
You're canceled.
Those controversial yearbook photos are coming back to haunt you, Jim.
It's mostly because of the hair, but okay.
Also, in the dark corner of the office, we have producer extraordinaire Andy Singer. Just escaped from an 18th century prison. Show yourself. Come on. 18th century French prison. Boom. See? Hamburglar. All right, guys. I am absolutely sick of talking about COVID and coronavirus and lockdowns and wearing masks, social unrest, police reform. We've talked about that. This is episode 249. There's 248 episodes where you can get that type of content. I want to go back to talking about climate change. So, but before we get to talk about that, I've got a number of topics here. I'm going to make fun of Bill McKibben. He's pretty hilarious. What is the current state of the climate change alarmist movement? And Al Gore. We'll get to Al Gore at the end. But
great.
Gentlemen.
Lockbox.
I don't know if you've noticed, but Parler is trending on Twitter as the alternative to Twitter. We've done episodes talking about Twitter and their bias against conservatives. And I forget exactly what caused it to launch. There was a couple of people that were recently banned from Twitter. So that has caused a bunch of people to go to Parler, including me. So have you heard of it? Do you have a Parler? Jim, I know you do.
Yeah, I joined Parler this week. If you want to follow me on Parler, it's Jim Lakely on Parler.
Is it Parler or Parlay? I've heard both.
I want to call it Parler because this is America, and we're just going to call it Parler. I don't care.
Get all that French crap out of here.
I like that. We're not pirates. This is Parler, not Parlay.
Yeah,
there you go.
Right. So I've got one. It's for our Stopping Socialism project. You can check it out at Stopping Socialism on Parler. Hard R there. Justin, you hopping on Parler?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I've got a big beautiful blue check mark on Parler. Yeah, I've got a big beautiful blue check mark on Twitter. So
a lot to give up.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure I want to give that up. I don't know. I will say that I know. Am I really going to start all over again? Like, I don't know. I will say this though. Twitter is a cesspool.
Yes,
it's a cesspool. It's a cesspool. It's just It's really. I actually think it's bad psychologically for people. Like, I think it's just a terrible place to be. With that said, please follow me on Twitter at Justin T. Haskins. Look for the big, beautiful blue check mark.
Twitter is a cesspool. I feel dirty just looking at what's trending. Even when there's something that's trending that like I can get behind, it's just people ridiculing it. It's an absolute nightmare of a place online. And it definitely like so I'm done with
this segment brought to you by Parler.
Yeah. Well,
we should see if they'll sponsor the show. That'd be great.
We should be so lucky. Yeah.
Well, we talked about Twitter and their bias and Trump's executive order to try to like force neutrality on it, But I honestly think that if Trump really wanted to hurt Twitter, and I've said this on a past episode, just move to Parler. You're going to bring millions of people with you overnight, and when you what's it called? It's not called a tweet, a Parler. Comments.
Maybe it's a parlay.
Yeah, exactly. It's a parlay.
But the news will have to report on each and every one of those the same way that they report on his tweets. So it'd be like they should seriously. There should be a movement to try to get Trump onto Parler.
If you look over at Parler, I have it on. I first started using it on the desktop, and now I have it on my phone. And it's not as intuitive or as easy to use as Twitter just yet. And I've actually been on some email threads with people complaining that Parler isn't quite as easy to use and doesn't have all the bells and whistles of Twitter. It's like, hey, we've been told that the answer to bias against conservatives on Twitter is come up with your own Twitter, which is ridiculous. And so here's an outfit that is giving it a try. And oh my gosh, it's not as good as Twitter in week 2 that in there. I mean, come on, give it a little bit of time. I think it's a good place to be. But you're right. If Trump was to go over there right now, it's a lot of basically it's conservatives. It's a free speech zone. These are people that will not be taken down and doxxed and all the other stuff because they express opinions that are out of favor with the left. But yeah, if Trump was to come over, who would come with him? All those lefty journalists. So, it's to follow him to be able to see what he says. So it'd be a mixed bag, I think.
Yeah. My concern about it, other than the fact that, again, I'd lose my blue check mark, is that I'm worried that it's going to end up becoming this place where it's just like the most wretched, people, truly a bunch of wretched people go over there. Do you know what I'm saying?
A wretched hive of scum and villainy? Is that what you're saying?
No, not quite to that level. Few can match that. But I do think that it could become a place where, what if it is just a bunch of, crazy people over there?
Well, apparently, I think we've already gotten to a point where it's a little bit more diffused than that, because there was apparently a alternative to Twitter called, I believe it was Gab.
Gab, yeah.
And that is being written off as just like the worst people are on Gab. So I think that Parler's already gotten past that point. There's 500,000 people that signed up to it just over the last 3 days. So I think that at worst, I've heard some friends talk about how they're worried that it'll just be like an echo chamber. I'm just well, what's Twitter if it's not a left echo chamber?
Well, Twitter can also be your own conservative echo chamber if you use it the way you want to. I mean, I have several lists. That's what I hope Parler does, is that it allows you to make your own lists of people that you really want to follow, and you want to make sure that you see that feed all the time instead of, right now I have the fire hose. I mean, Twitter is impossible to use as a fire hose. That's why you have to go to the trending topics and look for things and search for people you like. But, I like to use TweetDeck for Twitter, and I have 30 different columns of things that I have separated and curated out so that I could read. So I have things called conservative friends, so that, I peek over that every once in a while just to kind of see what's happening. And I have a few other people that I follow so I can see all of their tweets, including In the Tank podcast is in there as well. And so, Parler needs to be able to use Parler and separate those kind of things yourself and make lists. So, you can consume Twitter the way you want by making lists. Maybe Parler can do this, and maybe I'm speaking ignorantly because I've only been on it for a couple of days. But, we'll see. It's really hard for a social media company, to have a new social media service out there for people. We're already kind of saturated with that. It's very hard to move people off of Twitter, even though it's a big cesspool, because people get in the habits of something. It's very hard to change people's digital habits. So, the odds are against Parler all the way, even if Trump was to come over.
Yeah, of course. And it does seem like an app in its infancy, but I think there's room to grow there. And people are arguing that it's already reaching its tipping point. So if you are interested, follow me on that at Stopping Socialism. But gentlemen, I do want to talk about climate change stuff like I was teasing earlier. So this kind of came to my attention, or I was thinking about this, I think on the drive home or something, that it's we've seen these movements over the last couple of months, whether it's in the response to COVID, where we basically changed our entire lifestyles and shut down the economy and restructured all of this stuff so that we wouldn't get the flu. And then to all of these marches in the streets over civil rights issues. And I was just thinking, these climate alarmist types, they must be sitting there thinking what the heck, man? We've been trying to do this for decades, pumping billions of dollars into these movements. And the best we can get is a bunch of high school kids to walk out of class early on a Friday. What the heck? So that's kind of why I wanted to bring this up. What is the current state of climate change? But just my basic premise there, Isaac, do you see where I'm coming from? Good talk, Isaac.
Sorry. I thought I was on mute. I was setting up my Parler account. So, how dare you, Donald? That's the first thing I have to say.
How dare you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, okay. So I do think that, this is what always happens with climate change. It is, we're told that it is this huge issue, this most important issue, the defining issue of our time. And then as soon as anything else comes up, it goes away. So like, this is something that the left laments always, because it's climate change until the economy's bad, and then nobody cares about climate change again.
Right.
So I could see where they would justifiably be sad that they spent their entire lives for this and nobody cares. I could see that affecting your own personal sense of well-being.
Yeah, it's the cousin Oliver of like the movements, the political movements. Like nobody cares. Nobody cares about you. Justin, I mean, they did get one victory here. Apparently, the Seattle, the stadium that will be hosting the new Seattle hockey team is going to be called the Climate Pledge Arena. So, boom, climate change solved, right?
In your face, climate change.
That's their big victory, huh?
I'm a little disappointed that they didn't find a way to put autonomous zone in the name of the stadium, because you would think that would be like their primary. I've been to Seattle. Seattle's a beautiful place. It is a freak show.
You know what we should call that place?
It's a freak show.
What, Isaac?
I think that we should call it the Greta Thunderdome.
Nice.
Please clap.
Come on, people. Why aren't you coming to us for a good
That's
idea?
not bad.
The
That's
Greta
not bad.
Thunderdome. Just
it's what's so sad about it too is that it's for people who are really into sport. I love sports, and one of the things when you watch these new franchises that develop out of nowhere, like the last thing that you want to do when you're an expansion franchise is do something that is just like the most gimmicky thing that you could possibly come up with. What you want to do is look like you've been there forever. You don't want to look like you just showed up. And unfortunately, that's kind of exactly what they're doing. They're like playing into all of the right off the bat. A stupid stadium name. What's the mascot? What's the team name?
They haven't come up with a team name yet. So that's another.
They haven't come up with a team name?
I don't believe so.
So they chose the stupid Climate Arena name before the actual team name?
I'm gonna have to look that up. I thought they did.
Boy,
okay, maybe they did. It's the old Key Arena, which is what it used to be called, and now it'll be the Climate Pledge Arena.
Well, that makes sense because I'm sure that arena is terrible. Because didn't they leave it because they didn't build a new one in the first place? Isn't that why the Seattle Supersonics or whatever left? I think that's why they left in the first place.
What the Supersonics basketball team?
So that was So that was like 20 years ago.
So they're going to play hockey in an old basketball stadium?
Yeah, half of hockey is played in basketball stadiums.
Weird.
United
Center,
they do both the Bulls and the Black.
I don't know. Is it really the old arena? I don't know about that.
I have no idea. I don't follow this.
True. I think that they may have rebuilt it or something.
I'm just waiting for that to be New Chazistan.
To your point about the gimmick or whatever, they during the intermissions, you know how like sometimes they'll throw shirts into the audience. At the Seattle Climate Pledge Arena during the intermissions, Al Gore comes out and scolds you for 20 minutes about your carbon footprints. So that'll be fun.
Yeah, between periods of the hockey game, that's going to be a whole lot of fun, man.
Well, okay, and that's the other thing. It's like know your audience.
I love it.
The hockey audience really the audience for this? Like, why don't they just do this at the NASCAR track too? Like this is not exactly their core audience here. Now, if you want to do it at the soccer stadium, then fine. That makes sense to me.
Those
but the
snobs.
hockey crowd, I don't know about that. I don't know if I buy that.
Yeah. The third period, they play just like in a pool of water to show what happens when all the ice melts.
Oh man, they should just have like a crying polar bear as their mascot.
Yeah, they'll be playing either roller hockey or water hockey. Yeah, because it's all going to melt.
Yeah,
they just have a live polar bear eating penguins.
It's Eddie, the emaciated polar bear.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh man,
that's amazing.
By the way, it is the old Key Arena, so they are playing in the old arena, and they just renamed it Climate Pledge Arena, and there is no name for the Seattle hockey team just yet.
Wait,
okay.
wait a minute. So wait, it's the old arena?
Yeah, it's Key Arena.
Is this
which was there for the Supersonics in the 90s?
Is this green energy compliant? This stadium?
They say they're going to have 100% renewable energy. It'll be sustainable. It'll be 100% renewable energy.
How can it be
carbon neutral by 2024?
Is it made out of like an aluminum can? Like you can't make it 100% sustainable.
Well, the thing I love about it is you can't find a more energy intensive sport than hockey. Because how often does it freeze in Seattle? Like it's not like they're only playing hockey in Canada on a pond.
This is Minnesota,
right?
Yeah,
right.
I know. That's a great.
We have hockey teams in Arizona, in Florida.
Yeah,
like just a huge amount of energy that you have to artificially cool a stadium that is Climate Pledge Arena. Maybe Bezos is trolling everyone.
Maybe. Well, okay, but in
that
fairness,
has to be the only reason he built the Greta Thunderdome.
Wait a minute. I think that there's a reason for the Greta Thunderdome.
Yes, and I love it. That's going to be the name.
And I think
it's all going to start from us.
And I think that the reason is this: if you live in a world, a post-pandemic, apocalyptic climate change hellscape world where ice basically doesn't exist, then going to the hockey game would be like the only time that you could see ice, right?
Yeah.
It's like going to the exotic zoo or something. Like, oh my God, there's ice. Like that would. So maybe that's what it is. Maybe it's meant to like give people that experience of ice in a post-ice world.
This is what the ancient Americans used to do in their ice fortresses.
Well, I mean, just think about this, though. I mean, just think about how energy intensive the entire National Hockey League is. Putting aside, the refrigerants you need to make the ice in these arenas, you have to travel, you have to jump on planes, you have to, there's all this travel and all this economic activity that you're doing, because the idea is like, people go to the hockey game, then they go out to a restaurant, they go to a bar and they do stuff. Look at all the consumption that this new NHL franchise in Seattle is going to birth.
But yeah,
if they were serious about the climate pledge, they should be asking for at least the NHL to go back to the original 8 franchises instead of what do we have like?
Okay, this is actually
extremely irresponsible for the people of Seattle to even accept a National Hockey League franchise.
Yeah, actually, this is a fantastic point because it's not just that the hockey league, like any professional sports league, is energy intensive, but they are literally located the furthest away from the vast majority of teams in the league. So like every other sports league, the Seattle, they have a team in Vancouver, so there is one team that's close, but those two teams have to travel more than any of the other teams. So if they were going to be environmentally responsible, you wouldn't put teams in a place because they're not taking the bus from Seattle to Phoenix. They're flying to all of these places all the time, constantly flying. There's like a million stories about how Seattle teams are flying, they travel thousands and thousands and thousands of miles. So how is this energy? That's like the worst thing you could do for the planet, right? Greta, I don't know if we can call it the Greta Thunderdome.
Yes, we can.
I don't know, Isaac, because
we're getting it trending right now.
Greta wouldn't even fly one time from Europe to America. She had to take a boat. And these people are going to be flying more than anybody, like anybody in the whole country, practically.
What if they take a boat to St. Louis?
We are way off.
You could do it. You could go up the Columbia River, across the Continental Divide, over to the Yellowstone River, which flows into the Missouri River, which flows into the Mississippi. There is navigable water, Justin. You didn't know that because you've never been like west of Illinois.
Okay, so
East Coast elitist.
You don't know me, man.
Oh, I know you.
So send us your best suggestions for an alternative to the Climate Pledge Arena. I think the top one to beat is the Greta Thunderdome.
You're not going to beat it, people.
the challenge is on you.
Come at me, but you're not going to beat me.
Yeah. Before we tie bow on that, our friend Steve Malloy at Junk Science actually tweeted out today some alternative names for it. Unsustainable Arena, the Unicorn Center, and the Climate Bedwetter Dome are 3 of my favorites on there.
Oh, no way.
Yeah, I think
That
Isaac's got those beat.
Doesn't even touch. Somebody from the Babylon Bee will probably report on this, so we should actually submit this and get it made.
I'll do it right now.
Yeah,
dare ya.
All right. So the last time we talked about climate change related items was back in Earth Day. Was that April? Where Michael Moore and Jeff Gibbs came out with their newest documentary, which was called Planet of the Humans. We did 2 episodes dedicated to this, and it was just about breaking down what was in there and kind of like the flaws that we saw in it. But I don't think then we got distracted with everything else that's going on in the world.
With the global pandemic.
Yeah, and riots in the streets and all of that stuff. But I wanted to get back to this topic because Justin and I had a conversation about this where we really think that this documentary did a great job at like putting a wedge in between the 2 factions of the kind of climate alarmist groups. The one that's like kind of the more environmentalists, that's kind of like the Jeff Gibbs side where it's, just going green and wind and solar isn't enough. We have to like curtail the population, right? That side of it. And then the other side, which the people in this documentary kind of deemed like the green capitalists, which is basically, we can continue on doing what we've always been doing and destroying the planet. All we just need is wind and solar to power it. So this documentary was really like a wedge in between this, and we would have paid it so much more attention if there wasn't a global pandemic going on, that nasty thing. And I kind of wanted to circle back to it because I think that it is important, and I think that it's kind of a growing thing. And I've got an article here from Bill McKibben that kind of highlights that. But before I get into this article from Bill McKibben, maybe Justin, you can kind of expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that what's most interesting about the video really is I think it marks a turning point among the environmental left. And the environmental left is very large. I mean, within the left, I would say, most polls show that climate change is either is usually the number 2 issue for about half of Democratic voters. So among leftists, it's a very important issue. And I would say that this could be viewed as the turning point in the history of the environmental left in America, where you have this group that wants to move in the direction of, we just need less people, right? We just need fewer people. And unless you believe us on that issue, unless you're with us on that issue, then you're not a real environmentalist. And then all the other people who realize that message basically has no hope of ever reaching the masses. So they say, well, no, we can just keep doing everything we've always done. You don't have to change your life. That's not true. We just need solar panels and wind farms, which is wholly dishonest and completely ridiculous, as we've pointed out here many, many times. So I think, though, that at some point, it's not just going to be Michael Moore and Jeff Gibbs like crying out in the wilderness. Like I do think that they will have a relatively large following as time goes by, because the truth is that if you take that red pill, right, and you start looking at renewable energy, even if you have been totally for it, once you start looking at it, it is impossible to deny that it is terrible for the environment and that it can't achieve the things that they've been telling you that it can, and that it's all just a big fat lie. Like, it's a lie. That's what it is. And once you start going down that road, there is no other way around it. Like, you're not going to find another answer to that question. So I do think that there will be people who look at that and say, I'm going to look into this. And then the more they look into it, the more they realize, yeah, they're right. The only hope we have is some sort of global socialism type thing. We got to get rid of capitalism, and we need fewer humans. And anyone else is not serious about climate change. And because they've all whipped themselves up into this frenzy that we're all about to die from climate change. And this is important to keep in mind. They don't merely say that, things might get worse and that there'll be more diseases and that, there'll be some flooding. No, they say that plus it's an existential threat to human civilization and all life on the planet. And that's Elizabeth Warren who says that, and Bernie Sanders. It's not just like some fringe environmentalist like that. That's a huge part of their whole movement now. And so I think that this is could become a turning point where you see these two groups kind of diverge off, and you might see a lot of infighting within this camp in a way that we really haven't seen up to this point.
Right.
It's really pretty much been 98% of everybody who's in the environmental left agrees on everything. And there's been just a couple of lone voices who have a different opinion. I really think you're going to start to see a mainstream break off of it, and how that affects their overall movement and their messaging, and whether they can actually affect policy change and stuff. I think it's going to make it much harder for them to do that down the road.
I mean, Jim, you agree with my premise here that we're kind of seeing the formation of two distinct groups in the kind of the climate alarmist arena here, like the real environmentalists, and then like the Bill McKibbens of the world.
Well, I mean, Bill McKibben says he's a real environmentalist, right? He says he thinks he's in the real environmentalist group. So why are you putting him in the out group?
Well, I could read you some of the emails that he's apparently gotten, which
Go
are
ahead.
hysterical.
Which is great.
All right, well, let's just get to this article. So this is an article that was published in Rolling Stone magazine. It is titled "A Bomb in the Center of the Climate Movement. Michael Moore damages our most important goal." Subtitle: "It hurts to be personally attacked in the movie. It hurts more to see a movement divided." So,
God, I feel so bad for him.
Oh my gosh. You were attacked? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. I have no idea what that feels like. Boy, I feel bad for him.
So this article is less about the divide, which, you know, the title suggests, and more of just like him trying to defend himself for like 1,800 words here.
Yeah, it's nuts.
It's so
long.
It's so long, and all he talks about is himself, and it's kind of weird at some point. So he basically starts off in like the second paragraph. He talks about how like the 50th Earth Day came around and he was really happy. It says he just heard that Oxford University, the most prestigious educational institution on the planet, had decided to divest from fossil fuels. It was one of the great victories in the grinding 8-year campaign, which just in itself, like that, is pretty pathetic.
That is super pathetic.
Because we've talked about how like divestment like doesn't do anything. Doesn't really hurt, the fossil fuel industry. And even like Bill Gates wrote an article about how it does zero to combat climate change. And just the idea that like Oxford University, like the biggest victory that he's had in this 8-year campaign, is like kind of what I said to start off this whole segment, where it's like he's been working his entire life and this like non-event is like the biggest thing, but whatever. So anyways, he says that he called up his friend Naomi Klein, who helped him cook up an article so that they can gloat together about this. And then it says, "I was, it must be said, feeling pleased with myself."
So that is like for self-esteem, despite all of his bad emails, I guess. Keep going.
So then the hammer drops, and it says like basically later that day, all this emails and news starts coming out about Michael Moore having released his Planet of the Humans documentary on YouTube, free to watch for everybody, which got millions of views.
8.5.
And just a bit of 8.5 before they took it down.
Yeah.
So,
it's back up now, though, people.
Yeah, it's back.
And a little bit of context for the people who are unaware, and if you aren't, you should be aware. If you haven't seen this, you should. But basically, the entire documentary just destroys wind and solar and explains how they're terrible for the environment. They are not the savior that Bill McKibben makes it out to be. And that basically the people that are really pushing wind and solar are just buying into this like secret green capitalism agenda here. So it absolutely destroys kind of like the modern climate alarmist movement. And that's why I think that it's kind of fractioned it off into two separate parts. But so he says that he started getting these emails, and there's a swear in this one, so trigger warning. But he says that he got an email that says, "Happy Dead Earth Day. Time's up, Bill. You have been outed for a fraud. What a massive disappointment you are. Sellout, hypocrite beyond imagination, biomass bullshit seller, forest destroyer. How is it possible that you have led us all down the same death trap road of false hope? The youth, how dare you? Shame on you." It's like, so obviously Greta wrote that.
Great.
Can I just start? I just want to say one thing.
Go ahead.
If I get a lot of hate mail, if I'd gotten an email like that, it would probably have been like maybe the second nicest thing that I had received that week. So
do you get a lot of hate mail? How much hate mail do you get?
I get a lot of hate mail. Donnie and I have actually talked about doing a segment that's just like Justin's hate mailbag or something.
Yes, let's
do that.
Totally
should, because it's pretty egregious.
Yeah, we should absolutely do that.
So what a baby. And
wait.
Hold on,
No. Before you respond, because it's a perfect tee up for you. He's gotten other emails. Stop killing trees, you lying murderer. Forest our life, you're killing us all. Straight up evil, etc., etc. But then he's got a line, and you could respond to this. He's got a line that says, if you're wondering whether it hurts to get this kind of email, the answer is yes.
What is this? It feels to me like I imagined was he was sitting down, like he was like laying down in his bed, like late at night. He was like hand scribbling all of this into his diary.
Yes, dear diary.
And it was just like, dear diary, like I got a mean email today. And then he just like goes off on this gigantic rant about how sad he is that the movement, and you could just see himself saying, it's like, I know my feelings are hurt, but what's more important, the movement is hurt. And he's just scribbling all this stuff down as he goes through, and then realizes, you know what? I bet Rolling Stone would like this. And he types it all up and Rolling Stone publishes it. Like, that's the story of this crap article. But one thing right off the bat that makes me suspicious of it is that he says in the second paragraph of this whole thing that he found out about this because they sent him, he said, I've been hearing rumors of the film and its attacks on me since the summer before, and I'd taken them seriously.
Right.
He was interviewed in the movie. So what do you mean you've been hearing rumors about it? Like, don't you remember like awkwardly answering all of those or not answering all those questions that you were asked? I feel like this whole thing is just I feel like he's desperately trying to get people to feel sympathetic. Like that's the whole point of this is please feel sad for Billy McKibben. Like
he paints himself as the martyr during this entire article. He talks about how he found out that he was the main foil of this documentary.
Yes.
Was he? I know he was in it and he took a licking, but was he the main foil? I don't know. I think Al Gore probably took a harder hit than him.
I just love this. But none of that had apparently worked. Indeed, from what people were now writing to me, I was the main foil of the film. No. Like, renewable energy was the foil. You were just one of the people in there, like, peddling it. Like,
but Isaac, you don't understand. Bill McKibben is renewable energy. They're one and the same thing. He is it. That they're the same. It's the
consumes biomass. Whatever. He runs on biomass.
Well, Donnie, that first email you read, the person who wrote it was angry. Why? Because they've been sold their entire life this idea that wind and solar is going to save the earth.
Right. And
Michael Moore exposes that, that the amount of mining you have to do to create solar panels, the length of time a wind turbine survives is only about 20 years. And it takes an enormous amount of energy to make it, and to put it up, you have to clear out trees. There was that great scene where in Vermont, the greenest state, it's the Green Mountain State, right? And it is one of the, it's nirvana to environmentalists, and they're clear cutting the top of a mountain to put a bunch of wind turbines up. And the people there who actually believe in ecology, in saving the environment on a micro level, are outraged. And so, that's why he's getting that email and he's not taking it well for two reasons. One, he's never had any pushback from anybody of any power in our culture.
Right.
And this is the first time it's ever happened to him, and he's not taking it very well. I mean, this is the guy who goes on Letterman and goes on all the late night talk shows and is treated like some kind of hero for the environment, one of the great Americans that's trying to do something to save the planet. And then the truth comes out that wind and solar is actually very damaging to the environment, and it's all a scam. It's all a scam for guys like Al Gore and others who are investing in these things and forcing governments to invest in these things. It's a money-making operation. And it will not do anything to help the environment. And when these people who have been following blindly, people like Bill McKibben for years, they've been raised on this stuff. When the scales are finally moved from their eyes, they're going to be mad, and they're going to look up your email address, and they're going to send you a couple, and you ought to be able to take it. But he can't take it because he's never actually been challenged in the public square on any of this stuff for his entire life.
So, like, for the first 3 pages of this, I'm reading it, and just like, I wrote a note to myself saying, this is the most self-serving article I have ever read. And then I got to page 4, where he literally just starts listing off things that he should be commended for. Like, God. I'm sorry. This is the most embarrassing article I've ever read. But there is some stuff that I kind of wanted to respond to, and this kind of ties into a little bit more meat of the policy here. But after he pats himself on the back for 1,800 words, he talks about how he's willing to step down and kind of relinquish kind of being the face of all of this to people like Greta Thunderdome. And he says that he stepped down from the board chair of 350.org. And he basically is hoping that like him taking more of a back seat could help unify all of this. But he says like multiple times throughout this, like his critique, I guess, whenever he gets to it, of the movie itself, he says that it's deeply useless. It's full of endless lies. He says that Michael Moore went on a TV publicity tour of misinformation. He says that the movie is a sewer. He says that Michael Moore acted in bad faith. And then he actually gets to some points at some point, but he keeps going back to this idea that wind and solar is now actually cheaper than fossil fuels. And on one hand, I'm thinking, like, if that were the case, then, like, we'd be for it. Like, I don't care. If it's the cheapest thing, yeah, sure. Put up some solar panels. I don't care. But then I found an article from the Center of the American Experiment, written by a guy you might have heard of named Isaac Orr, that is talking about how one organization's claim that solar and wind is cleaner and cheaper is a fraudulent talking point. So, Isaac, maybe you can kind of walk us through this. Set us right here. Set us and Bill McKibben right here.
Yeah, I sure will. So people like to say that solar and wind are cheaper, and people like to believe that because there's no fuel cost, right? People are used to having to put fuel in their car and like, oh, gas is so expensive. But what they don't realize is that building the wind turbine or the solar panel itself is incredibly expensive. And as a result, it's still more expensive to generate electricity with that than it is to just use a coal plant. So a lot of times these sneaky devils will say, oh yeah, well, it's cheaper, but then they'll tell you like the subsidized cost of it. And I have this graphic in this article. I encourage everyone to check it out, but I've got this guy, he's got both of his pockets out of his pants. And like, it doesn't matter if you pay the cost of solar out of your electric bill or out of your tax bill through higher taxes for the subsidies. It doesn't actually change the cost of it. It just changes how it gets paid or who pays it. And another thing, so Jim, you're the vice president of the Heartland Institute now. So I would assume that you're the number 2 head honcho. So if somebody showed up to work 18% of the time, how long would you keep them on payroll?
1 day, 1 week. Yeah. I'll give them 1 week to fix it up. 1 week.
What is the matter with you? 1 day.
All right, 1 day.
Thank you. But that's all solar does. Like when you look at the amount of electricity that solar generates in Minnesota, 18% of the time, wind only 33% of the time. So that means like there's no way to store electricity. And like this is how they get around it. Like they don't tell you how much it actually costs to do this. So let's break it down this way. Let's say you had a car, right? And it was just a normal gasoline powered car. You can drive it rain or shine. And let's say you had 2 more cars, one that only worked when the wind was blowing and one that only worked when the sun was shining. Like under all normal circumstances, you would just drive the one that already works because it's reliable. But what we've done in this country is we've mandated the use of wind and solar at a state level, and we subsidized it at a federal level. So we're like, okay, well, maybe the sunshine and I'll use this sunshine car. But, you know, you basically still need to pay the fixed cost of the car insurance, the car payment, the interest payment. If you are like people unlike me who don't pay cash for their cars. But there's a lot of fixed cost that goes into that. And you
barter with cows, right?
Yes, I do. And chickens. Everyone from Ricochet Network. I grew up on a farm in Wisconsin, and that's a reoccurring theme on the show. So welcome to the conversation. So you have to pay the fixed cost for the solar the solar car, the wind car, and your normal car. And that's what's happening to our grid. And that's why it's actually, some of the coal plants in Minnesota operate at like $30 a megawatt hour, and wind is like 84 and solar is 150. Once you start taking into account all these other costs that go into it that are hidden from the people, or that people who promote wind and solar like to hide. So like Michael Schellenberger says it best: if wind and solar are so cheap, why do our electricity prices keep going up? So in your face, Bill McKibben.
yeah, in your face.
I'm glad Michael Moore made you cry.
Hey, take it easy on him, man. Take it easy. He's had a rough month.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So I don't know. It's just, it seems like, and maybe it all started off with this Planet of the Humans documentary, but the whole climate alarmist movement has really just taken a hit right in the solar plexus. And I'm curious as to kind of what we think the future is, because obviously this is a decades-long movement. It doesn't seem like they're going to step on the brakes at any time soon. They've kind of just waited for their moment to get back in the sun. But like, what is their path forward? Jim, what do you think?
Their path forward is the same path they've always taken.
A bad one?
The what?
A bad one?
No. They look. I really believe that guys like Bill McKibben, despite his tear-filled Dear Diary, Rolling Stone, I don't believe that the environmental movement in this country and globally thinks of Michael Moore's film as anything more than a speed bump on the way to a glorious green and socialist future. They're basically ignoring it. They continue to prop up Greta Thunberg as their leader, as the global leader, who is impervious to any criticism because she is a mere child. And if you say anything at all in criticism of Greta, you are savagely attacked by them, by the media, and pretty much our entire culture. So I don't think, frankly, the environmental movement, despite what Michael Moore is telling the world, which is the truth, that green energy is bogus and is not going to be enough to keep us in our standard of living, and that people are not going to buy it, and it's more expensive. And Isaac's little segment there was a fantastic tutorial on all of that. It's onward and it's forward. It's onward and upward. And in fact, if Joe Biden wins the election in November, you're going to see a Green New Deal version on fast forward, because if Biden wins, that probably means they take this, the Democrats take the Senate too. It will be unified Democratic leftist radical control of the United States. And so you're going to see immediately lots and lots of environmental achievements from their perspective like you've never seen before.
Isaac, you got your ear to the ground on some of the state level policy when it comes to climate change and all that. I mean, does it seem like it's let up recently because it hasn't been in the spotlight, or is it still going? We're just not paying attention to it as much.
Oh, it's still going. And the reason it's still going is wind and solar are entirely dependent on the government. They need mandates, they need subsidies, and they also need government approved monopolies. Like, most conservatives think their electric company is a private company and they can do whatever they want. That's not actually the case. It's a government approved monopoly. So basically, you're forced to buy your electricity from your utility provider in most states. So and they're guaranteed to make a profit every time they build something. So they actually want to be the least efficient way possible, or build things in the least efficient way possible, because that's how they maximize their profits. So no, this has to move forward. It always must move forward, because the industries go away without these supports. So we've actually seen House Democrats at the federal level trying to jam through a whole bunch of like transmission line spending, because that costs extra billions of dollars just to build the wind and solar. You need to build billions of dollars in transmission lines in order to make that work. And they're trying to extend the federal subsidies, and they're trying to do the same thing at the state level in terms of passing new legislation that upgrade or basically ups the renewable energy mandates. So basically, they're trying to package this as a way to bounce back from the coronavirus economic destruction.
Right.
And, they're always going to try and put the most positive spin possible on it. They have to spend a lot of money on public relations because there's really no value for their product. Like, their product is bad. So in that case, Well, that's how it works, right?
Sure.
If you have a crappy product, you can either go sell a different product, or you can lobby the government to try to force your product onto the market. Like, those are your options.
Nice. Absolutely. Justin, I think I know what you're going to answer when it comes to what is the future of the climate change movement. And people that have listened to our Stopping Socialism videos will probably know where he's going to go with this. But yeah, take it away, Justin.
Well, I kind of go back and forth a little. If we're talking really long term, I go back and forth a little bit on how this is all going to shape up. But I think the main overarching idea here is that because the predictions that are being made all the time are so far into the future, they're never held accountable for making false predictions. And as a result of that, it's a really valuable tool to use politically, because you can always make a new prediction. You can always adjust the prediction. And as long as it's dire and the media supports you and doesn't question it, then you can keep going back to that well for basically ever, until the media, and because so many of their predictions are 50 years into the future, 80 years into the future, whatever, there's no way to ever say, well, look, you were wrong. All you can do is look at the past predictions and show that they've been wrong in the past. We can already do that. We can already look at 50 years of failed predictions. So that doesn't really matter. They have a huge advantage for that reason. With that said, the reason I think they keep going back to it isn't just because it's good, politics in some ways. I think the biggest reason why they go back to it is because, for me, climate change is the socialism Hail Mary. Okay, that's what it is. It's when all other arguments fail. When you can show that socialism doesn't work for a variety of different reasons, economic reasons, historically. You can look at human nature. You can look at all sorts of different things. You can show all these failed examples of socialism for years and years and years. But you know what you can't do? You can't worry about all of that if we're all going to die from climate change. None of that matters. See, so when all the other arguments fail, they can still turn to that and say, yeah, capitalism is good at, producing things, and it's good at certain things. Sure. That's the Naomi Klein argument, essentially, is, yeah, capitalism is good at a lot of stuff, but you know what's really bad at? Protecting the planet. That's what she would say. She's made a whole career on that. And because of that, I think that the real purpose of this is to use this to continue to grow the size of government, increase the power that people have over your life who are in these government bodies, increase global government, I think is a big part of this. That's why you see so many global efforts. It checks off so many left-wing boxes. All the things the left has always wanted to achieve, apart from climate change serves as the excuse for achieving those things. And because of that, it's the perfect answer to anything. I don't care if capitalism is better at producing wealth. I don't care if people are better off, because it doesn't matter. We're all going to die unless we do socialism. And capitalism cannot save the planet the same way socialism can, because it's all about consumption and driving economic growth and all of that stuff. And that can't be our primary, focus. So for that reason, I think it will continue to go forward for decades and decades and decades. There have been times where I thought, gee, how many times can you get predictions wrong before people start to look around and say, like people our age, are people our age, are they going to, in 30 years, if the world hasn't ended, are they going to say, you know what, like the world didn't end, like that was a load of crap? Maybe they will. But I don't know, if we're told over the next 3 decades that it's just 3 decades down the road or 4 decades down the road, then I guess a lot of people will continue to buy into it forever. So I really don't think it's going to go away. There's been times where I thought it would, but now I'm under the impression that because it's such a perfect argument, it's such a perfect tool for socialism, I think an effective argument, not a perfect argument, but an effective argument for socialism, I think that they're going to continue using it for many, many years to come.
Isaac, you have a response to that?
Yeah, so I don't disagree with Justin's assessment that it is a great bludgeoning tool for, if you don't like this, not only do you hate grandma, but you hate grandma's grandkids. which is essentially all it ever boils down to, right? At the end of the day, that's the argument. But at some point, nuclear power is going, like, the cost of running a grid on wind and solar and batteries is so impossibly expensive that, you guys remember the Yellow Vest riots that happened in France because they wanted to increase the cost of diesel by like 30 cents a gallon or something like that. And, like, granted, it's France. They love to riot. They're fun-loving people. But that would happen in other places too. Like Chile had the same thing. So, like, at some point, the cost of this, like, physically impossible fairy tale that they fixate on, which is the Green New Deal, wind, solar, batteries only, is going to become so unbearable that it'll implode. And if they are going to be serious about climate change, like in Minnesota, they're like, oh, climate change is an existential crisis, but they don't count the hydroelectric power that we buy from Canada as renewable. It's just stupid. It's illegal to build a new nuclear plant. So, like, there are technological fixes that basically get rid of this entire argument, right? It's nuclear power.
Yeah, but as you said, Isaac, though, it's not really a market. So the same people who benefit from perpetuating this idea that we have to do it this way through wind and solar are the same people telling us we can't use nuclear. That's not an option.
Exactly.
And so as long as they can just continue to trick people into thinking that nuclear can't do everything they want it to do. I mean, really, nuclear is their answer. If you just didn't care about cost at all, really, and you were just like, I just want the cleanest form of energy that will have the least impact on the environment, nuclear energy is the obvious answer to that question.
Absolutely, 100%.
There's no question about it at all. And it's been like that for many years. I mean, it's not even like a new thing. It's been like this for decades. And yet they still won't go there because nuclear doesn't, I don't think they're ever going to let people believe that about nuclear, because nuclear doesn't have all the extra added benefits of everything else, right?
Yeah, Michael Schellenberger talks about this all the time.
Right, and that's I think why we'll never see it, because they'll just continue fooling everyone into thinking that nuclear can't do those things, that nuclear is so bad that it won't ever be able to do those things. Well, and you brought up the cost. One last thing, Donnie, and then I'll shut up. The cost part of it, I think, is really important. I agree totally if we're living in a normal universe. But unfortunately, we're a rational universe. Let's say that. We don't live in a rational universe anymore. You can print as much money as you want now. It doesn't matter. And the people who are advising Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez and all these people who want the Green New Deal, they're telling them, who cares? Just print the money. It doesn't matter. You don't need taxes. Just print it.
Well,
so I don't think the cost thing, they'll go to people and say, this isn't going to cost you a nickel. We're just going to, the government will pay for it.
Yeah, infinite subsidy.
And they'll print the money. That's right. Exactly.
Well, and I'm curious, Jim, because we've got the ICCC 14 coming up in April. So that was postponed because of coronavirus.
Yeah.
But it's happening in April now. And I'm wondering if kind of the landscape has changed based on some of the stuff that we've seen in the last couple of months. Namely, what Justin was just talking about. Like, I really feel like the talking point of just trying to dismantle the Green New Deal, talking about that $90 trillion over 10 years, that almost seems like not a big deal after the money printing that we've done the last 3 months. So do you think that the experts that are going to be coming and talking are going to kind of take this into account?
No, it's a very good question. And we have many months now. We have 9 months to figure out what our program is going to be. And, look, Heartland Institute has done climate conferences. This is our 14th coming up. We've also done a few conferences focused just on energy. And, I think one of the things that's important to think about and to know inside, why don't the environmental left, why don't they embrace nuclear power? And it really comes down, in my mind, to this. Because you can have capitalism and freedom and nuclear power,
right?
And you can't boss people around and change their entire lives and order them around and force them to do things that you want to do for the good of the planet or whatever reasons they come up with. Because nuclear power, if we were to go entirely 100% nuclear power, then everybody would be able to just live the way they're living right now. In fact, they'd probably be able to live better because overall the cost of energy would be so low. But the environmental left doesn't want that because they don't like freedom and they don't want you living your life the way you want to live your life. They want to tell you how to live your life. And the way to do that is to make energy expensive and scarce. That's like step one. If you can do that, then you can really, they call energy the master resource. And for a reason, and it's because it underpins everything in an economy and basically humanity, the way humans can and will live. It all comes down to energy, especially in today's modern society. If they allowed nuclear power to expand, you would have actually more capitalism. You would have more economic growth. You would have more people happy in the world. The environmental left is an extremely unhappy movement, and they seem to want to make everybody else just as unhappy as they are.
Would you say they're addicted to outrage, Jim?
Yeah, they might be. That's a good popular. That's a good title for a podcast one day. Maybe we can do that.
Cool. Next week?
Maybe. But yeah, so I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I absolutely agree with everything you just said there, Jim. I think I've echoed stuff like that in the past. And let the record show that it was Isaac that referenced Michael Schellenberger like 3 times during this episode. It wasn't me, who has been popular for bringing that guy up and what he has to say, because I really like it.
Johnny,
what's up?
When are you going to book him?
Yeah,
I've been trying. Maybe I'll parlor him.
Robert Bryce got him on his podcast.
I had Robert Bryce on this podcast before. So
right, I know. So like, you got to pull some strings, buddy.
I'll do my best.
That's not even 6 degrees of separation. You got to make this happen, man.
I'll try. I will try. But yeah. So, gentlemen, what else? Any last words? Any words of wisdom here? Anything you want to get off your chest before we sign off for the week?
I just have a few choice quotes from this Bill McKibben.
Yeah, let's circle back to that,
because it's great. But enough about the future of humanity. Let's talk about me. Since I got to be the stand-in for corporate environmentalism for much of the film.
Wait, is that a direct quote?
Yes, that's in there.
Yeah, and it was after like 6 paragraphs of him talking about himself already. So
it's great. And like, it just reminds me of that thing. Like, remember when they gunned down what was the thing with Iran? Everyone was calling it World War III. There was that meme going around with this like woman. She's like, how can I focus on World War III when I'm busy with World War B? Hilarious. And here's longtime solar advocate. And, oh, yeah, the guy who wrote Heart of Gold, Neil Young. Just like, how is that relevant, buddy? Like, you got some old folk singer.
He's amazing.
He's so good. Rolling Stone, you drop in Neil Young, you're trying to write to the audience, I guess.
That's not the audience, Jim. The audience of Rolling, there is no audience for Rolling Stone.
Right. What do you think the average age of the writers or the readers of Rolling Stone is? It's probably up there with Reader's Digest and AARP.
Yeah.
So?
Nobody's reading Rolling Stone.
Nobody cares about Rolling Stone anymore.
I think you get
a bunch of hippies in Vermont that read it. I think
you get a free subscription when you get AARP, so that's pretty cool.
All
right, well, that's it for today. If you like our show, please subscribe, rate, or review for us on iTunes. It'd be greatly appreciated. You could also find us on SoundCloud, Stitcher, Google Play, YouTube, pretty much everything nowadays, Spotify even maybe. If you'd like, you can follow us on, I was going to say Twitter, but don't. Twitter's a cesspool. We'll make a Parler account. How about that? You could also send us your comments, suggestions, questions to the show by emailing us at inthethankpodcast@gmail.com. Justin, where can the fine people find you?
On Facebook and Twitter at Justin T. Haskins. So I'm not going anywhere, guys.
Well,
I'm riding it out.
As long as you say it with that level of shame, I'll let it slide. Isaac Orr, where can the fine people find you?
I will just want to say Rolling Stone, according to the Wall Street Journal, reduced its circulation from 1.5 million copies to 650,000 in 2018. So the good guys are winning. And you can follow me at The Fracking Guy on Twitter and Parler.
Fantastic. Jim Lakely, same question.
You can follow me at Jay Lakely on Twitter, at Jim Lakely on Parler, and also check out heartland.org.
Why don't you just make it the same so that way it's easier for the people?
Andy, do you have a soundbite to play us out here?
I'm one of the people who's very, very prone to sensory overload.
Thank you, and we will talk to you next week.